Welcome to another installment of Live Strong with Lorenzo. I've been putting off doing this video a little bit just because it's an uncomfortable video for me to make, but today the topic will be my journey with alcohol and how I stay stopped one day at a time. I've been without a drink for 13 years now, and the way I'd like to do this video today for anybody out there who's interested or concerned about their drinking or has someone in their life who does drink and it affects them. This is I'm sure you've heard this maybe as an AA expression, but AA means Alcoholics Anonymous. This is my experience, strength, and hope. So these are my experiences, and this is what works for me. And this is how my journey was with alcohol. Someone else's journey could certainly be different, be varied in many different ways. There's many different types of alcoholism, but I am certainly an alcoholic and recovering alcoholic. I guess I'll start. I'd like to just qualify as if I was at an AA meeting, and you can hear my story and see the effect and damage alcohol had on my life. It almost killed me in the end. I started drinking in 1981 when I was 15. I grew up in Brooklyn. I had a great upbringing, and my parents followed a perfect living master in India, which one of the requirements was no alcohol or drugs, which as an early teen, that made it much more curious to me and much more desirable. Secretly, I really was like, well, why is this such a taboo? So at 15, I started and I experimented with a lot of different things, drinking, really overdid it with a couple things early. And then I laid off for a while. So fast forward to 17, and I started drinking, and when I went to college, I got accepted to Cooper Union in New York City. And I don't know if anybody knows McSorley's, which is on 7th Street, but I did a good amount of drinking because I was accepted to a fraternity in college. And I excelled because they voted me the social chairman, and I did really well at throwing parties and hosting events, and I think that's where I started the beginning of my social skills. But unfortunately, the focus was much more on the drinking and the partying rather than my studies and being focused on my future. And that was the beginning of a big problem. So I drank really heavily in college and basically flunked out of school with a 2.0 GPA, and started to gravitate towards restaurant jobs almost immediately. And I was really getting quite dysfunctional with drinking and some of the drug use I was doing in the early 80s. My first restaurant gig was 1986. I was 20 years old. And I was making great money right away, but I was drinking heavily and driving at the same time. And one of the things that was really just a downfall for me with drinking is I lost all sense of discernment. I lost all sense of right and wrong. And I made some really poor choices when I was drinking. Things that could easily kill me. And I know that my higher power spared me a number of times. You know, by the grace of God, I'm still here, and I'm very grateful. Throughout that period, I flipped over, I'll tell you one story, I flipped over a Cadillac in 1986. I had it airborne, flipped it over. I was 50 feet airborne, came down on the roof and skid upside down for 200 feet down a mountain road in Bergen County, New Jersey. And when the car came to a stop, my first inclination was to get out of the car. I crawled out the bottom, and I wanted to lift the car over and drive away. I mean, we're talking like a multi-thousand-pound Cadillac that was destroyed, and I'm lucky I crawled out alive. But an officer had found me at the scene. I said headlights came, and I had to swerve, officer, I'm sorry, and he just drove me home and dropped me off at my house in my bed and didn't even give me a DUI, which at the time, being very grateful, realized I was just being hugely enabled because I didn't address my drinking and continued to drink after that. So my parents would not, something I really respected about my parents is they had a code for living under their roof, and if you didn't abide by the code, you had to leave. So my mom did not appreciate me drinking, my drinking and drug use. under her roof. So I got my own apartment since I was making such great money in the restaurant, and I got a cheap car, and I really was partying like a lunatic. And I just want to go into this briefly. This is about my drinking, not about drugs, but unfortunately, because of the drinking, I said yes to a lot of drugs I normally would have never said yes to. I never did needles because needles always scared me, and I was terrified of injecting anything, heroin, cocaine, otherwise speedballs, whatever. But one weekend, a friend of mine who was a bartender invited me over, and he had some crack, and we smoked a couple of vials of crack one night, and I proceeded to do that like once a weekend for about 6 to 8 weeks with him. That was our recreational treat. But I knew deep down something was really evil about that, and I just want to say, all throughout my drinking, there was always a sense deep down that I knew this wasn't right. I knew something was seriously wrong with the picture. Like my gut, my inner soul, my heart was telling me, please, this is not right. And it was so faint, but it was always there throughout all this period. But thank God, by the grace of God, after about a couple months of trying that, I stopped with him. I just stopped hanging out with him because I knew he was a really bad influence. But I continued to drink. And September of that year, I'm 20 years old, my boss comes to me, I think you have a problem with drinking and drugs, and I have to let you go. So he let me go from my job in September '86, and without a job, all I did was drink all day. I was drinking round the clock. I was truly miserable. I remember one morning I drove up to Harriman State Park with a half a gallon of Fleischmann's vodka in my trunk, and I was just swigging shots out of the trunk whenever I wanted to stop and pull over. And I just drove up at like 6:30 in the morning just to be in the woods, just because I was looking for some type of salvation. For me, at least, nature was there was some calling there, some type of desperate hope that I could stop, that I could give up. I just knew this was so wrong. But needless to say, 3 days later, I went to a party at Ramapo College, and I got a horrible DUI on 17 South. Woke up face down in a jail cell in Ramsey, New Jersey, and the officer was laughing at me because I was lying in my own puke. And he was laughing and said I was playing bumper cars with the guardrail on 17 South. I don't even remember that happening. So by the grace of God, I lived through that. And another thing I want to say, I'm really grateful I never hurt anybody. I'm so grateful I never killed anybody. I'm so grateful I never injured someone driving drunk. So after that, my parents had to come get me out of the Ramsey jail cell, and that's when I knew I needed some help for the first time. And I went to AA, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I worked the program for 6 months. I worked really hard, and then I decided to treat myself to a ski trip to Italy by myself. Not a good idea. The first day there, I met these 6 Canadians who brought their own Crown Royal scotch in their luggage, and I kind of knew I was maybe in trouble. But the first night there in Livigno, Italy, up in the Italian Alps, it was gorgeous. I fell off the wagon, and I fell off really hard while I was on vacation for 2 weeks skiing in Italy by myself with these Canadians, and I drank like a fish every day, every night, right back to the same pattern. Came back and proceeded to secretly drink, trying to hide it from my parents, but I was living at home and they knew it was a problem. But I was really trying to control it. And that's another thing I just want to interject for a second. How much energy you spend on trying to control your drinking, or how much I did, is a definite sign. I tried every single way in my life to only drink beer, not do shots, only have wine, only have 3 or 4. For whatever reason, trying to modify and control my drinking, it always crept up and bit me in the ass. And it always, after a while, it just came back with a vengeance. There's a saying in AA, the man takes the drink, then the drink takes the drink, and then the drink takes the man. And let me tell you something, when I stopped, the drink had really taken me. So I met someone when I came back from Italy who was 8 years older than me, and I fell in love with her. Her name was, it doesn't matter what her name is, but I decided to pull something called a geographic, which I don't know if people know. You think that if you move somewhere else, everything is gonna get better. You're gonna have a new start, fresh start. So I moved to Tucson, Arizona, and my drinking just increased and got more exacerbated, and it truly became insane. I was binging a lot more. I met the wrong type of people that I would drink and do a lot of cocaine with. There was one night I lost my car in Tucson. I was doing an 8-ball and drinking shots with this guy, and I don't even remember. I don't even remember getting home. I had to go look for my car in the city the next morning and just look around downtown Tucson just to find the car. I didn't know where it was. You know, a lot of these things started happening, and then on my 23rd birthday in February 1989, I went out to dinner, celebrated way too much, and I realized that coming home, I pushed my fiance while she was driving. We were arguing, and I never wanted to be that guy that would hit a woman, touch a woman, and I decided to stop. And now I did not have a drink from February 25th, 1989 until 2010. It was 21 years I abstained. And I proceeded to get married in those years, happily married, 3 kids. I was working the program in AA in the late 90s. I was really doing a lot of service. I was really trying to work the program, but I got away from it. And in the late, like 2009, I was working a restaurant called Bistro 55. And I remember one night, now this is after 20 years of not drinking, and it's really insane because think about that, you know, after 21 years, you know, why would you go back to something like that? But one day I'm doing a liquor inventory, and I'm a restaurant manager, and I see the condensation on this Heineken bottle. And I remember it just spoke to me. And I said, like, well, what's one beer? What's one beer gonna do? And can I tell you, that started such a nightmarish time in my life. From that time, the end of 2009 till 2013 when I quit, my drinking came back with such a vengeance and a ferocity that literally almost killed me. I was having stresses in my marriage, financial stresses, intimacy stresses, different things. It doesn't really matter because, you know, life always has stresses, but I wasn't dealing with them properly, and I wasn't dealing with them the best way possible. So after that, I started dabbling, and I eventually got fired from that job from drinking and drugs. And they caught me on videotape drinking tequila at night in my office. And it just started a whole thing where eventually I think even my ex-wife got fed up and we separated. And I was not there for my kids the way I wanted to be. And it was really nightmarish. That time was such a nightmare for me. I lived with a couple of guys in Jersey City. I lived with a friend of a father of a friend. Thank God he put me up. But throughout that time, I literally had a routine of drinking a 1.5 gallon of Svedka every single 3 days like clockwork. I just want to say for 2 years, every single day like clockwork, I drank a 1/2 liter of vodka. And I would just do frozen shots out of the freezer because I didn't want to get fat from mixers. Yeah, it's insane. You're just crazy. And yeah, I had such a miserable life. I hated myself. I had such self-loathing. I was going through a horrible divorce. I just wanted to die, literally. Thank God for this kindness of this gentleman, Steve, who would put me up in his house. No questions asked, just the kindness of his own heart. Didn't even ask me for rent. If it hadn't been for him, I would have been homeless at the time. And I endured this for a long time. I was having dry heaves every morning, living with him. My routine was basically, I couldn't even hold down a job at that point, too. I was jobless. I would basically wake up, drink, pass out about 5 or 6 hours later, nap, wake up, and do repeat. And that was really my and then with occasional outbursts or getting a little violent here, not violent, but just aggressive, with just outbursts of verbal aggression and just frustration. And I just really remember wanting to die. I really remember hating my life. And then one day around, it was Thanksgiving of 2013, I came out of my room one day and I just handed Steve the bottle. And I said, I can't do this dance anymore, Steve. I'm dying. I can't do this. And I remember, I think I had really reached my bottom. And there's something they say in AA, you know, you got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I remember I gave him the bottle, and then I proceeded to sweat it out for 72 hours and detox in the house, going back and forth between the shower and my bed, shivering. I was seeing yellow and green colors in the shower. I was hallucinating. I felt like I was dying, but I knew that whatever it took, I was not going to go back to drinking again. And I just had to stop, no matter what it took. And it was really, you talk about being at probably one of the lowest points of your life. That was probably it. And you talk about being humbled, and you realize there's no doubt that there's a God, man, because if it wasn't for my higher power, I wouldn't be here today. Throughout that time I was drinking, I mean, I've been to cocaine parties where they had mounds of cocaine on a table. I mean, it's just by the grace of God I'm not dead, you know, because drinking took me to such places of stupid, horrible choices, you know. So I gave Steve the bottle. I sweated out for 72 hours. And then a week later, I joined the gym. I joined 24-hour fitness because my dad had instilled that in me from my childhood. And here we are 13 years later. You know, I occasionally, personally, now this is my experience, but I don't really work a strong AA program because I still use recreational cannabis in my life. So I consider myself California sober, I guess. And I don't really like to use the word sober because I'll just reflect on these things. A drug is a drug is a drug. And I will be honest, I've lived my life completely sober, and I've lived my life with a little cannabis in my life. And I prefer that lifestyle right now. If that changes, maybe that'll change. But I do love myself, and I love my life today. And I do know that without a doubt, I would like to just reflect on a couple things about drinking. That a couple things, if you think you have a problem at all in your heart, deep down in your gut, you probably do. If there's any shred of you that thinks you have a problem, I can almost guarantee you have a problem. And alcoholism comes in many forms. It doesn't have to be drinking around the clock. You could be the binge drinker, or the person that blacks out once a week when you go out with friends and they have to reconstruct the night from the night before from you every single time. You know, for me, it made my life completely unmanageable, you know, and it really took me to such a dark place in my life of dysfunction and self-loathing and self-hatred. And I also think that when we encounter those type of darkness in life and those struggles, that it makes our ability to pursue other things in a really strong way. And I can see the way I apply myself to health, fitness, and my workout regime today, that I apply the same possibly alcoholic behavior, but I apply it to that in a good way, with a positive application. It's just channeling that energy towards good and positivity and well-being. But you know, sometimes it's darkest before the dawn. I also want to say, you know, I met this guy Bob Bilheimer in AA. I used to have my home group, used to be on 79th Street and First Avenue in the city, the workshop there. And his name was Bob Bilheimer, and he was such a beautiful man. He was like an angel to me. But he said that, you know, life is 10% what happens to you. And he didn't say it, but I'm sure you read it somewhere. But life is 10% what happens to you and 90% the way you handle it. And he was a huge fan of the Serenity Prayer. And those two things together, I know I've said it in my other video, it really helps me not stress the small things or worry about things that are out of my control, which it just enhances our serenity. You know, I do think too that something else I have to say is, I don't really think you can get sober for any other reason than truly for yourself. You can't get sober because of somebody else. You can't get sober because of protecting a situation or wanting for some other reason other than truly for your own self. And it was when I was truly sick and tired and wanted to help me and love me that I got sober, that I got clean. And I've been without a drink for 13 years, and the way I live my life today, I love my life. I love dancing, I love health, I love fitness, I love to perform, I love to flourish, I like to shine. You know, when I was drinking, my energy was so diminished and toxic, and I really literally felt like I was dying. And I'm sorry, I know this has been a little bit of a longer video, but I really think it's important for people. If anybody wants to reach out to me too, please direct message me. I'd be happy to share anything with you about the challenges of drinking, you know. And I really, you know, and just do remember, as much as drinking is fun out there socially, alcohol is technically a poison. It is not good for us, and it has a negative adverse effect on our bodies. Whatever you want to say about it, that's the truth. And my life is much better without alcohol in my life. I really still, every day I wake up in the morning and I'm so grateful I don't drink. I'm so grateful I'm, you know, without that in my life. And I just want to share too, I wore this shirt today because I love the regular show. I don't know if anybody knows it, and this is one of my favorite characters, Monster Man. Because it was such a heavy video, I wanted to light it up with a shirt of this caliber. So I think that's enough said, but you know, just please, if you really look inside your heart, if you think you might have a problem, and really, you know, think about the way your life could be without it in your life, because I am very grateful that alcohol is no longer a part of my life. Thank you guys, thank you so much.